there is a piece of videotape that still exists. It is from 1980. The picture is barely holding together. The colors bleed. The image warps and drops out the way tape does when it has been sitting in a box for 40 years, slowly forgetting itself. But you can still see him. A man on a bright, gentle set, smiling into a camera at children who cannot smile back. The program lists him as Alex Laurier. He is one of the hosts of Polka Dot Door, a show that millions of Canadian kids grew up on. Soft songs, a talking clock, a friendly creature in a polka dot costume who only ever shows up when one host has conveniently stepped away. It is one of the safest, warmest images Canadian television ever produced. Now here is the part that does not fit. By the time that tape was rolling, this man had already stood in a courtroom. Not for a parking ticket, not for something you can shrug off. 6 years earlier, he had been convicted of 4 separate offenses against children. And he was still here, still on the show, still talking softly into the lens at an audience of kids who had no idea. How does that happen? Who allowed it? Did anyone know? Those are the questions this video is about, and the real answer is not the one you are expecting. To understand how something like this slips through, you first have to understand what it slipped through. Polka Dot Door went on the air in 1971. It was made by TV Ontario, the province's public education channel, which matters because this was not some fly-by-night operation. This was the trusted channel, the one schools turned on, the one parents felt safe leaving running while they made breakfast. The format was simple and intimate by design. 2 hosts speaking directly to the camera, directly to your child, like friends who had come over to play. The whole show was built on closeness, on trust, on the idea that the person on the other side of the screen was exactly who they appeared to be. And the man in that 1980 tape had a background practically engineered to earn that trust. As a teenager in the 1950s, he had been named an outstanding actor at a drama festival. He studied theater at the University of Toronto. He became a French teacher. He earned a master's degree. He toured as a folk singer who specialized in songs for children, released a children's album, and turned up again and again on Canadian kids programming through the 1960s and 1970s, including, by various accounts, brushes with the most beloved children's franchises in the country. On paper, he was the ideal candidate, educated, gentle, musical, wonderful with kids, the kind of person you would hand a children's show to without a second thought, which is precisely the problem, because the warm, respectable background left something out. And the first crack in this story does not appear in the 1990s when most people finally heard his name. It appears years earlier, in 1974. In 1974, Alex Laurier was convicted of 4 similar offenses against children. Read that again, because the date is the whole story. 1974, not the 90s. The middle of the decade when he was, by surviving accounts, the most frequent male host the show had. For those 4 convictions, he received a suspended sentence and 2 years of probation, no jail. He walked back out into his life. And his life, at that point, was children's television. This is where most people assume the record must be murky, that maybe he drifted off the air, that surely a conviction like that ended things quietly. It did not. We know it did not, because of that tape. The 1980 episode is not a rumor. It survives. It is real footage of a real man hosting a children's show on a public education network a full 6 years after a court convicted him of 4 offenses against kids. So the question stops being abstract and becomes very specific. How is he still there? And to answer that, you have to stop looking at the man for a minute and start looking at the world around him. Because in 1974, the tools we now assume have always existed simply did not exist yet. Before we get to the part where this story stops being just strange and starts being genuinely hard to sit with, do me a quick favor. If you are into forgotten stories like this one, the kind that hide in plain sight inside something everyone remembers fondly, hit subscribe and tap that like button. It is a small thing, but it tells YouTube to keep sending you down these weird little rabbit holes with me. Okay, back to it. Because the moment you understand the system he was operating inside, the mystery gets bigger, not smaller. Here is something almost nobody thinks about when they imagine how a convicted person gets stopped. the entire infrastructure for stopping them is surprisingly young. In the 1970s, there was no sex offender registry in Ontario. There was no national database a producer could check. And the single most important tool, the vulnerable sector check, the background screening built specifically to keep people with offenses against children out of positions of trust with children, did not exist in Canada until the year 2000. Think about that gap. The exact instrument designed to catch this exact situation arrived roughly a quarter century after Laurier's first convictions. Ontario's sex offender registry, often called Christopher's Law, also arrived in 2000. The machinery we now take completely for granted, the unglamorous paperwork that quietly protects kids every day, had simply not been built yet. So one explanation writes itself. Maybe nobody at the network ever knew, because in that era there was no system whose job it was to tell them. No automatic flag, no checkbox on a hiring form. A conviction could happen in one room of society and never travel to the room where hiring decisions were made. It is a clean explanation. It almost lets everyone off the hook. Almost. Because a suspended sentence and 2 years of probation is not a secret whispered into the void. It happened in open court. It was, by definition, a matter of record. So the question sharpens into something uncomfortable. Did the people around him genuinely never know, or did someone know and the show simply went on? For 20 years, the public side of this story stayed quiet. The show kept airing, the reruns kept rolling. A generation of kids grew up, moved on, and remembered the songs. And then, in the summer of 1994, it surfaced. That July, Alex Laurier pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting an 8-year-old boy. The Toronto Star reported it on July 15. The Ottawa Citizen ran it the next day under a flat, brutal headline about an entertainer jailed for indecent assault. He was sentenced to 1 year in jail. But look closely at when the crime happened. The assault he pleaded guilty to in 1994 had taken place in 1973. 1973, the year before his 1974 convictions, which means that during the very stretch of years he was a fixture on a children's show, singing, smiling, speaking gently into the camera, there were already children being harmed. The warm man on the warm set, in the era we remember most fondly, was already someone a court would one day confirm. And that is the moment the nostalgia curdles, because you cannot unknow it. Every soft, sunny frame from those years now has a shadow standing just off camera that nobody filmed. We are very good at remembering the show. We are terrible at remembering the cost. Ask anyone who grew up on Polka Dot Door, and they will light up. They will do the catchphrase. They will tell you about the songs and the clock and the creature and the costume. The fondness is genuine, and there is nothing wrong with it. The show, as a show, gave a lot of kids something gentle, but there were children on the other side of this story too, and almost no one remembers them at all. An 8-year-old boy, whose case took 2 decades to reach a courtroom, 4 earlier victims from the 1974 convictions, whose names and ages and faces never entered the public record and never should have to, real children. Real people who carried this quietly through their own lives while the rest of the country remembered only the happy parts. That is the uncomfortable arithmetic of nostalgia. The warmth and the harm are printed on the same reel of tape. We chose to keep one and forget the other. And it leads straight back to the question this whole story keeps circling, the one we still, even now, cannot fully answer. So let's lay the pieces on the table, honestly, the way the surviving record actually leaves them. Here's what we know for certain. He was convicted of 4 offenses against children in 1974. He was demonstrably still hosting a children's show in 1980. There is footage. And in 1994, he pleaded guilty to a 1973 assault on an 8-year-old boy and went to jail. 3 solid facts, well documented, sitting in newspaper archives and a surviving tape. And here is the part nobody likes. The part that is the real heart of this mystery. We do not have the document that tells us whether the network knew. No internal memo has surfaced, no producer's note, no station statement responding to the conviction, no police press release. The one piece of paper that would answer who knew and when has never turned up in the open record. The trail simply goes quiet exactly where you most want it to speak. Which leaves 3 possibilities, and the honest truth, is that the evidence does not let us pick between them. 1. Management genuinely never knew, because in that era, nothing was built to tell them. 2. Some people knew, but no policy existed that required removing him from a children's show, so nothing happened. 3. The information existed somewhere in the justice system but never crossed into the offices where hiring and rehiring were decided. That is the reveal, not a villain in a boardroom hiding a file, something quieter and honestly more disturbing. A system so full of holes that a convicted man could keep a job speaking to children every weekday, and decades later we still cannot reconstruct who was supposed to stop him. The scandal is not only what one man did, it is that the gap he walked through was wide enough that no one even had to choose to look away. After 1994, there is no evidence he ever returned to children's television. He turned up in a few adult acting credits, but the children's television chapter was over. The show itself wound down. New episodes ended in 1993, with reruns drifting through the decade. The franchise stayed beloved and stayed almost entirely uncoupled from any of this. Most fans never connected the two stories at all. And then, in 2000, the country quietly built the thing that had been missing the whole time. That year, Ontario created its sex offender registry. That same period gave Canada the vulnerable sector check screening designed for precisely this, for people seeking positions of trust over children, capable of surfacing even old or set-aside offenses when the role involves kids. There is no evidence that Laurier's case caused those reforms. But the fit between the gap his story exposes and the protections that arrived afterward is almost too neat to ignore. The tools that would have caught him were built, just one full generation too late to matter for the kids who were watching in 1980. Which leaves one last question, not about him, but about us. This is not really a story about a single man, as much as we want it to be. A single villain is comforting. A single villain can be caught, named, and filed away. This is a story about how trust used to work. For most of the 20th century, we handed the most vulnerable audience imaginable, small children, to whoever seemed warm enough, talented enough, respectable enough to deserve it. We trusted the background. We trusted the gentle voice. We trusted the face on the screen, because the boring, essential machinery that checks whether the face is telling the truth had not been invented yet. And nostalgia did the rest. It took the warm parts and quietly buried everything else, until a beloved memory and a documented harm could live on the very same tape, and almost no one noticed the second one was there. The hardest thing about this story is that it does not give you the ending you want. There is no clean moment where someone saw the file and chose evil. There is just a silence in the record. A gap where an answer should be, the tape still exists, the smile still plays, and the one thing it never managed to capture is the only thing that would explain it. Who was watching the man the children were watching